Today we're going to learn about a flat wash, how to apply a flat wash, a flawless flat wash. Let's get started. Okay, so we are here with our paper on a 30-degree tilt. Why we tilt it 30 degrees is so that the gravitational forces will help us to pull down the pigment and create that flawless wash. If you have your paper on a flat surface, you have the possibility of a backflow, which creates a watercolor bloom. We don't want a watercolor bloom, so we want to use the gravitation to help us to create the flawless wash. So I'm going to show you how to do this with just water and a fully loaded brush to start with. So I dip my brush, I hold my brush to the surface. Let's see if I can get my angle here. Okay. So you go across and you're trying to get this bead. And depending on the size of what you want as to what size brush you're going to use. So how big of a wash you want to create as to how big your brush is. So you determine that before you start painting. Now see, we have a bead forming here. So once we have the bead forming, which is this water along the bottom, once we have the bead forming, then we can move our brush down and we go across without lifting. Then we dip, we move down a little bit, we overlap. The reason we overlap is so that we create that flawless stroke that we're trying to do. So you go back and forth. And it's best to practice this with no paint to start with, so that you get down what you're trying to accomplish. You get down your stroke the way you want it to work. Okay, so once you get to where you want to stop, then you pick up a paper towel. You wipe off your brush so that it creates what's called a thirsty brush. And with that thirsty brush, you then are able to soak up the water and the pigment, if you happen to be using pigment, on the bottom. Okay, so now that I've shown you with water, let's do it with paint. So as I said, you can do different size brushes depending on your requirement. And the way you tell your requirement is you take your brush, you dip it in water, and you stroke it across your page. And when it starts running out of water, that's how far you can go. So depending on the size of your brush, as to how far across, it will give you a clean stroke. So for this, I'm just going to use my paint here. I'm going to fully load my paint. I'm going to go across. I didn't get a bead, so I'm going to go in the same place, come back. Still didn't get a bead, but I'm starting to. Go back across. There, and now I'm going to go one more time just to get that nice bead. Now once you get the bead, you bring it down just a little bit and you go back across. You dip. You start from point B, go back across to point A. Now, as you see, I'm not lifting my brush. You do not lift your brush in the middle. You go from point A to point B without lifting the brush. You have your brush at a slight angle. It's basically parallel to the paper, but not quite, I guess. I always call it parallel, but it's not quite parallel. Yeah, there is a slight angle there. You always maintain the bead. And when you're done, you wipe off your brush. Ignore my phone, I'm sorry, it's ringing. You wipe your brush off, you get your thirsty brush, and then you pick up the excess paint at the end so that it doesn't cause a watercolor bloom by backwashing back up in. You also, once you start painting, you don't go back up in here and try to fix anything up here. You have to let this dry completely. Now I do have little dabby spots that I'm going to pick up. So that wasn't touching up here. I was touching over here to pick up my little drip points. Oh, I have a little bite out right here. Oh well, I can't change it. So we will let this dry for about 20 minutes, 25 minutes, and then we'll come back and we'll do our second layer. And by doing a second layer, we get rid of some of these imperfections that you might be able to see on the camera and create a nice, beautiful wash. So I'll come back shortly. Okay, now we have waited for definitely a 25-minute plus. This is completely dry, and you make sure by touching the back of your finger, and it should feel the same as if you touch over here to over here. There should be no coolness to your paper, so it feels the same. So then we just do the same thing again. We fully load our brush with the paint. We start at the top. We go across. We don't have a bead. We repeat again. We go across. We still don't have a bead. We go across again. We just keep on repeating until we get this bead. Because once we get the bead, then we have the flawless wash. There. Now see the bead? Isn't that beautiful? Now we can go a little bit down and we can carry that bead. We dip. We go across. We carry that bead. We go across. We dip. We go across. A to B, B to A. Dip. A to B, lift, dip, B to A. Now, of course, because I have that bite out of this one area, it's going to look a little funny right there. But there we go. Then we get all of the paint off of our brush. We get our thirsty brush and we soak it up. Soak it up. See how it just soaks it all up? Just soaks it up, or you can actually carry it down too. See, I've got that bite out of it, so it's not really a flawless wash at this point because I had that bite. So I'm just going to actually use my thirsty paper towel at this point. But see, you take your thirsty brush and you run it along your edge, and then you end up with your soaking up your edge. See, my edge is clear up here, but because I had this bite out of it, it kind of looks funny. But as you do your layers again and again and again, depending on what your requirements are, how many layers you want to do, you can create just beautiful, flawless washes. So I hope you found this video helpful, and you will need to practice. You can't just watch this video. You need to get your skin in the game and practice. So practice with water first to get your strokes down, and then just practice with paint. Hope you found it helpful.